One drunken promise between my best friend and me changed everything. What kind of promise could change everything between two best friends? And what happens when a single promise makes you question where friendship ends and something more begins? Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we get into today's story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about friendship, love, and the feelings people struggle to put into words. Thank you for spending your time here and for continuing to support the channel. It truly means a lot to have you along for these stories. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you think one unexpected promise can permanently change the way two best friends see each other? Now get comfortable, settle in, and let's begin. Tell me I didn't promise you something life-changing last night. Logan Mercer heard his own voice before his eyes were fully open, and judging by the silence that followed, he immediately wished he'd kept his mouth shut. Morning light spilled through unfamiliar curtains, cutting pale gold stripes across the living room. His head rested against the arm of a couch he recognized a second later as Julian Hayes's, which explained the dark green blanket tucked carefully beneath his chin and the glass of water waiting on the coffee table. It did not explain why Julian was standing by the window holding two mugs of coffee like a man preparing to deliver extremely bad news. Logan pushed himself upright. His wrinkled button-down still smelled faintly like the bar they'd visited the night before. One sock was missing. His dignity, apparently, had left with it. Okay, Logan said, rubbing both hands over his face. Before you say anything, I would like it officially noted that I remember at least 70% of last night. Julian finally looked at him. That's generous. 60. Still generous. Logan accepted the coffee Julian offered him. Exactly right. One splash of cream, no sugar. Of course it was. Julian had known his coffee order longer than some of Logan's coworkers had known his last name. Did I embarrass myself? Logan asked. Define embarrass. Singing? No. Dancing? Thankfully no. Did I call my supervisor and explain why 12-hour shifts are an attack on human happiness? The corner of Julian's mouth moved, almost a smile. Not this time. Logan relaxed into the couch. Then we're fine. Julian didn't answer. That was when Logan noticed it. Julian wasn't teasing him. He wasn't delivering one of his dry little comments and waiting for Logan to catch up. He was staring into his coffee, thumb moving slowly along the ceramic rim. Logan had seen that gesture before. Julian did it whenever he had something important to say and wished someone else would say it first. Jules. Julian's eyes lifted. Something in them made Logan sit straighter. What? Julian hesitated. You made me a promise. Logan waited for the punchline. None came. Rainwater still clung to the outside of the windows, turning Portland into a watercolor of gray streets and blurred traffic. Somewhere in the apartment, the old refrigerator clicked off, and suddenly the room felt impossibly quiet. Logan tried to laugh. What kind of promise? Julian studied him for a long second, like he was deciding whether the truth was fragile enough to break between them. You really don't remember. It wasn't a question. Logan's smile faded. Apparently not. Julian looked away, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. And for reasons Logan couldn't explain, that tiny movement frightened him more than any answer could have. Because Julian knew almost everything about him. 10 years of bad dates, family arguments, midnight phone calls, terrible apartments, career changes, birthdays, heartbreaks, inside jokes nobody else understood. There had never been a silence between them Logan couldn't cross. Until now. 14 hours earlier, he'd still believed there wasn't a single thing in the world capable of making Julian Hayes feel like a stranger. He had been wrong. 14 hours earlier, Logan had been standing in Julian's kitchen stealing strawberries from a bowl while Julian tried to fix his tie. Stop moving. Julian caught the knot and pulled Logan closer by it. You are 27 years old. How are you still this bad at formal clothes? Logan looked down at the 6 inches between them. I save lives. I have specialized skills. Apparently none involving neckties. Julian loosened the crooked knot and started again. His fingers worked carefully beneath Logan's collar, and Logan found himself watching Julian instead of the mirror. He had seen that face thousands of times. College mornings, road trips, Sunday breakfasts, hospital waiting rooms when Logan's mother had surgery. Julian had simply appeared that day with coffee and stayed for 9 hours without being asked. That was Julian. He stayed. There. Julian flattened Logan's collar with both hands. For one strange second, neither moved. Logan noticed the faint crease beside Julian's eyes. Julian noticed him noticing. What? Nothing. Logan stepped back and grabbed another strawberry. You look old. Julian stared at him. Get out of my kitchen. 10 years of friendship had made affection easy to hide inside insults. They had met during their freshman year of college when Logan accidentally sat in Julian's assigned seat during an orientation seminar. Julian had politely asked him to move. Logan had refused on principle. By dinner, they were sharing fries. By sophomore year, everyone treated their names like a matched set. Logan and Julian. Julian and Logan. When Logan became a paramedic and started working exhausting 12-hour shifts, Julian learned to recognize the nights when "I am fine" actually meant "please stay on the phone with me." When Julian began restoring rare books for a small conservation studio downtown, Logan became the only person willing to listen to 20-minute explanations about damaged bindings without pretending his phone had suddenly rung. They knew each other's silences. That was the dangerous part. At the engagement party that evening, Logan noticed Julian go quiet before anyone else did. Their friend Marcus had just raised a glass to his fiancée, talking about finding the person he wanted beside him when everything else changed. Everyone applauded. Julian smiled, but his fingers tightened around his glass. Logan leaned closer. You okay? Perfect. That is your lying voice. Julian glanced at him. I do not have a lying voice. You absolutely do. It gets very British for some reason. Julian laughed, softly, and some of the tension left his shoulders. Logan bumped their arms together and left his there. Neither moved away. Later, walking through the cool Portland drizzle, Julian held the umbrella while Logan complained that dress shoes had been invented by people who hated feet. Their shoulders kept touching beneath the narrow canopy. At the corner, Julian stopped. Want to go home? Logan studied him. There was something unfinished behind Julian's expression. Not yet. Across the street, their old neighborhood bar glowed amber through rain-streaked windows. Logan nodded toward it. One drink. Julian gave him a skeptical look. You always say one. And someday I will mean it. Julian smiled and followed him across the street. Logan did not know it yet, but before that night ended, one of them would finally say something they had spent years pretending not to know. The bar had changed since college, but only enough to make Logan resent it. The old jukebox was gone, replaced by carefully curated playlists, and the scratched wooden booths had been refinished until they looked respectable. Julian slid into their usual corner anyway. This place used to have character, Logan said. This place used to have sticky floors. Exactly. History. Julian smiled into his drink. One became two. Two became a slow walk back to Julian's apartment beneath steady rain, followed by the discovery of a nearly forgotten bottle of whiskey in his kitchen cabinet. By midnight, they were sitting on the living room floor with their backs against the couch, jackets discarded nearby, and shoes abandoned somewhere between the door and the coffee table. Logan held his glass toward the ceiling. Marcus is getting married. That was generally the theme of the evening. No, I mean married. Julian turned his head. There is only one kind. He found his person. Logan's voice softened unexpectedly. Julian looked down at his hands. Yeah. Silence settled between them, comfortable at first. Then Logan noticed Julian rubbing his thumb along the side of his glass. That gesture again. You have been weird. All night. Thank you. You know what I mean. Julian exhaled. Do you ever think about what happens to us? Logan frowned. Us. 10 years from now. Julian kept his eyes on the rain sliding down the windows. You meet someone. I meet someone. Careers change. People move. Suddenly we are sending each other birthday texts instead of knowing what is actually happening in each other's lives. Logan stared at him. That is not happening. You cannot know that. I do know that. How? The question came out quieter than everything before it. Logan had no clever answer. So he set his glass down. Because you are you. Julian laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Excellent argument. I am serious. Logan shifted until he was facing him. You are not some college friend I occasionally remember exists. You are the person I call when my shift goes badly. You know my mother's birthday. You know I hate silence when I am upset, even though I pretend I want to be alone. Julian finally looked at him. And you know I reorganize my books when I am anxious. You alphabetize them aggressively. It helps. Logan smiled, then held out his pinky. Julian stared at it. What are you doing? making this legally binding. That is not how laws work. At 30, if we are both still single, we date each other. Julian went completely still. Logan's smile faded at the edges. 3 months. A real chance. No pretending it is a joke. Logan. Promise. Julian looked at his hand, then at Logan. Slowly, he hooked their pinkies together. And if it ruins us? Logan should have laughed. Instead, something warm and frightening moved through his chest. He leaned closer until their foreheads almost touched. What if we have been ruining it by pretending there is nothing here? Julian stopped breathing for a second. So did Logan. Their faces were close enough that neither could hide behind humor anymore. Logan's gaze dropped briefly to Julian's mouth, then returned to his eyes. Julian whispered his name like a warning. Logan did not move away. Why wait 3 years, he murmured. And in the quiet that followed, Julian realized Logan had finally said aloud the question he had been afraid to ask for 6 years. By morning, the courage Logan had found somewhere near the bottom of a whiskey glass had disappeared completely. Julian stood by the window while Logan sat on the couch holding his coffee with both hands, trying to reconstruct the missing pieces of the night before. So that was the promise? Logan asked. Julian nodded. At 30, if we were both single, we would date for 3 months. Logan let out a breath. That is surprisingly reasonable for drunk me. Julian looked at him. There was more. Logan froze. Of course there was. Julian hesitated long enough to make Logan nervous. You asked why we should wait 3 years. The room went quiet. Logan lowered his coffee. I said that. You did. And what did you say? Julian looked toward the window again. Nothing. Logan knew him too well. That is not true. I did not know what to say. Julian. You were drunk. So were you. Not enough. Something changed in Logan's expression. Julian immediately wished he could pull the words back. Logan stood and crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. Did I make you uncomfortable? No. The answer came too quickly. Logan noticed. Of course he noticed. Then why does it feel like you are trying to convince both of us that none of it mattered? Julian swallowed. Because if it mattered, everything changed. Because friendship had rules they understood. Friendship had survived 10 years. Whatever existed beyond it had no guarantees. Instead, Julian said, you do not even remember saying it. Logan looked down. That landed harder than Julian intended. Right. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Logan gave a small, nervous laugh. What if we test the theory? Julian blinked. What theory? That this is either the worst idea we have ever had or something we should have figured out years ago. Julian stared at him. You are suggesting what exactly? 3 dates. Logan lifted 3 fingers. Not 3 months. 3 dates. Completely sober. If it feels wrong, we stop. Friendship preserved. Nobody moves to another state and changes his name. You already know I hate Nevada. See? We are communicating beautifully. Julian tried. Not to smile. Failed. 3 days later, they had their first date at a small restaurant along the river. It should have been easy. They had eaten together hundreds of times. Somehow, the word date ruined their ability to behave like functioning adults. Logan pulled out Julian's chair and immediately looked horrified by himself. Why did I do that? I have no idea. Should I push it back in? Then I would have nowhere to sit. Logan covered his face. Julian laughed so hard he had to look away. The awkwardness slowly dissolved. They talked about work, old professors, Logan's mother, Julian's latest restoration project. Familiar things. Safe things. But underneath them ran something new. When Julian smiled, Logan noticed how long he held his gaze. When Logan reached across the table to brush a crumb from Julian's sleeve, his hand lingered for half a second too long. Neither mentioned it. After dinner, they walked along the river beneath the city lights. At a crosswalk, Logan reached for Julian's hand without thinking. His fingers closed around Julian's. Warm. Familiar. Different. They crossed the street. Logan did not let go. Julian did not ask him to. Half a block later, Logan glanced down at their joined hands, and then at Julian. This is weird. Julian's heart sank. Then Logan squeezed his hand gently. I did not say I disliked it. Julian looked away before Logan could see his smile. For the first time in 6 years, hope felt less like something Julian needed to hide. By the 3rd date, Logan had stopped pretending he was counting. He still called it date 3 because rules made the situation feel manageable, but nothing about Julian felt experimental anymore. Their second date had been a late breakfast after Logan finished an overnight shift, followed by a walk through a used bookstore where Julian spent 40 minutes explaining why someone had repaired an old 19th century binding incorrectly. Logan understood perhaps half of it. He listened to every word. Now, on a cool Saturday evening, they wandered through a riverside festival beneath strings of warm lights, carrying paper cups of hot cider while music drifted from somewhere behind them. Julian was telling a story about a customer who had tried to clean a century-old book with household spray when Logan realized he had stopped listening. Not because he was bored, because Julian was smiling. Really smiling. His eyes narrowed slightly at the corners, his hands moving when he became animated. Logan had seen that smile for 10 years. Tonight it felt unfairly important. "You are staring," Julian said. Logan blinked. "I am listening." "What did I just say?" "Something criminal involving cleaning products." Julian laughed. "Impressive." Their shoulders brushed as they walked. Neither corrected the distance. Later, they stopped near the river, where reflections from the city stretched across the dark water. Julian leaned against the railing. Logan stood beside him, close enough that their sleeves touched. "So," Julian said, "that is 3. Logan looked over. "3 what?" "Dates." "Oh, you forgot." "No." He had. Julian nodded toward the river. "We survived. That is the problem." Julian's smile disappeared. "What problem?" Logan stared at his cup, searching for the version of himself who could make this funny. That version did not show up. "I do not want to go back." Julian went still. Logan continued before fear could stop him. "I thought this would feel ridiculous. Like dating my brother, except significantly less horrifying because you are not my brother." Julian almost smiled. "Excellent recovery. I am struggling here." "I noticed." Logan finally looked at him. "Everything I thought would feel different just feels like us. Except now I notice things." "What things?" "Your hand when it is next to mine. The way you look at me when you think I am not paying attention. How much I hate saying good night and walking away." Julian's expression softened. Logan swallowed. "I keep thinking I am supposed to be discovering something new, but I am not. It feels more like recognizing something that was already there." For once, Julian had no quick response. He stepped forward instead and wrapped his arms around Logan. Logan froze for half a heartbeat, then held him tightly. They had hugged hundreds of times. Airports, birthdays, bad days, good news. This one carried all of them inside it, and somehow meant something else. When they separated, Julian stayed close. His eyes moved briefly to Logan's mouth, then back up, giving him every opportunity to step away. Logan did not. "Can I kiss you?" Julian asked quietly. Logan smiled, nervous and almost relieved. "Please." The kiss was soft, brief, uncertain at first. Then Logan touched Julian's cheek and kissed him again. Julian smiled against him, and Logan started laughing. "Do not laugh during our first kiss. I am terrified. That makes 2 of us." Hours later, they lay fully dressed on top of Julian's bed, shoulders touching, hands loosely intertwined between them. The room was dark except for streetlight slipping through the blinds. Logan stared at the ceiling. How did we miss this? Beside him, Julian became very quiet. Logan turned his head. Julian was already looking at him. "I did not," Julian whispered. Logan's smile slowly vanished. "What does that mean?" Julian tightened his fingers around Logan's hand. His eyes held 6 years of something Logan had never known how to see. "It means I have been trying not to love you for a very long time." 6 years? Logan's voice barely disturbed the darkness. Julian kept his eyes on the ceiling. Their hands were still joined between them, but the warmth that had felt comforting moments earlier suddenly carried the weight of every year Logan had failed to understand. "Almost," Julian said. Logan slowly sat up. "You have loved me for 6 years." Julian released his hand and pushed himself upright against the headboard. "This is exactly why I did not tell you." "That is not an answer." "Yes, Logan." 6 years. Logan stared at him. Memory arrived in pieces. Julian driving across town at 2 in the morning when Logan's first serious relationship ended. Julian sitting beside his mother in a hospital waiting room while Logan paced the hallway. Julian remembering every brutal shift, every promotion interview, every birthday Logan claimed he did not care about. There were other memories too. Julian going strangely quiet whenever Logan introduced someone he was dating. Julian leaving parties early after watching Logan disappear. onto dance floors with someone else. Logan had seen all of it. He had simply given every moment the safest possible name. Friendship. Why did you never say anything? Julian laughed softly, but his eyes looked tired. And say what? That the most important person in my life was also the person I could not afford to lose. Logan's chest tightened. You could have trusted me. I did trust you. That was the problem. I trusted what we had more than I trusted what might happen if I asked for more. Logan looked down at his hands. Suddenly the kiss by the river felt different. The 3 dates felt different. Even the promise felt different. So when we started doing this, you already knew what you wanted. Julian's expression changed. I knew what I felt. That is not the same thing. But I did not. The words landed between them. Julian became very still. Logan immediately regretted them. I do not mean that I feel nothing. I know. Julian stood and walked toward the window. Do you? Logan asked. Julian folded his arms. I know you care about me. Care. Logan hated how small the word sounded. Over the next week, something invisible shifted between them. They still texted. They still met for coffee. Julian still reminded Logan to eat after long shifts, and Logan still brought Julian lunch when he became buried in restoration work. But every gesture now seemed to ask a question neither man knew how to answer. Then, on Thursday afternoon, Logan received an email at work. He read it twice before calling Julian. They met that evening at Julian's apartment. Seattle? Julian asked. Logan nodded. Advanced paramedic training. 6 months. I applied months ago. I forgot they were announcing placements this week. Julian's face brightened automatically. Logan, that is incredible. Is it? Of course it is. Logan watched him carefully. They need my answer by Monday. Julian looked down at the kitchen counter. For one reckless second, Logan wanted him to say do not go. He wanted Julian to give him a reason that had nothing to do with careers or timing or common sense. Instead, Julian smiled, gentle and painfully familiar. You should take it. Logan felt something inside him drop. Right. You wanted this. Right. Julian heard the change in his voice, but misunderstood it. He thought loving Logan meant refusing to become an anchor. Logan heard Julian's encouragement and misunderstood that too. He thought Julian was already preparing to let him go. Neither noticed that they were standing only 3 feet apart, both quietly terrified of losing the same thing. By Friday night, Logan had heard Julian say, "You should take it," so many times in his head that the words no longer sounded supportive. They sounded like permission to leave. He found Julian at home repairing the loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet, because apparently emotional disasters did not excuse household maintenance. Are you busy? Logan asked. Julian glanced over. Not really. Logan stayed near the doorway. 3 feet had become 10. I accepted Seattle. Julian's hand stopped. Only for a second. Okay. Congratulations. Logan stared at him. That is it. Julian set the screwdriver on the counter. What do you want me to say? I do not know. Something real. Julian's expression tightened. I am happy for you. You look relieved. Relieved? Like this solves something. Julian turned fully toward him. What exactly do you think it solves? Whatever happened between us? Silence. Logan laughed once, without humor. There it is again. What? That thing you do when you decide silence is safer than telling me what you actually feel. Julian looked away. You already know what I feel. Do I? Because 1 week ago you told me you have loved me for 6 years, and now I am leaving for 6 months, and you are acting like I told you I am changing grocery stores. What would you prefer? Julian asked. Should I ask you to give up an opportunity you worked for because I finally admitted something I should have kept to myself? Maybe I want to know that me leaving matters to you. Julian's composure cracked. Of course it matters. Then say it. It matters so much that I am trying not to make it your responsibility. Logan went quiet. Julian pressed both palms against the counter, eyes lowered. I spent 6 years making sure my feelings never became a burden you had to carry. I am not going to start now. You think loving me is a burden? No. I think knowing I love you might become one. Logan stepped closer. You do not get to decide what I feel for me. Julian finally looked at him. His eyes were bright with everything he had spent years swallowing. And you do not get to choose me because you are afraid of hurting me. Logan stopped. Julian's voice softened. I want you to choose me when you are sober, Logan. Not because of a promise. Not because we kissed. Not because I waited 6 years. I want you to look at me and know. Logan opened his mouth. Nothing came. That silence answered more than either wanted. Julian nodded slowly. Exactly. Logan left without their usual hug. Without Julian telling him to text when he got home. Without turning around. For days passed. It was the longest they had gone without speaking in nearly a decade. Logan worked, slept badly, reheated dinners he barely touched, and discovered how many pieces of his day automatically belonged to Julian. A ridiculous story from a coworker. A song from college playing at a coffee shop. His mother's text asking whether Julian was coming to Sunday dinner. Each time, Logan reached for his phone. Each time, he stopped. On the fourth night, he sat alone in his apartment after a long shift and opened their message thread. His thumb hovered over Julian's name. 10 years of conversations filled the screen. Photos, jokes, check-ins. Are you home? Did you eat? Call me when you wake up. Logan suddenly understood what hurt so much. He was not terrified that dating Julian had ruined their friendship. He was terrified because losing Julian felt nothing like losing a friend. And for the first time, Logan knew exactly what that meant. Logan did not call first. If he called, Julian could let it go to voicemail. If he texted, Julian could spend an hour deciding what every word meant. So Logan stopped at their usual coffee shop, ordered 2 drinks, and drove straight to Julian's apartment. When Julian opened the door, he looked exhausted. His hair was uncombed, his sleeves were rolled unevenly, and there were faint shadows beneath his eyes. Logan had seen him after all-night restoration deadlines looking better than this. Julian looked at the cups. Bribery. Peace offering. For what? Being an idiot for approximately 27 years. A tiny smile threatened Julian's mouth, then disappeared. That sounds expensive. I brought the good coffee. Julian stepped aside. Inside, everything was painfully familiar. Logan's spare phone charger was still beside the couch. His old college sweatshirt still hung over a dining chair because Julian had stolen it years ago and never returned it. Logan set the coffee down but remained standing. I am going to Seattle. Julian's expression closed immediately. I know. No. Listen, I am going, and I need you to understand that before I say anything else. Julian folded his arms. Okay. Logan took a breath. I kept waiting for you to ask me to stay. Julian looked startled. Logan. And when you did not, I got angry because I thought it meant you could imagine your life without me more easily than I could imagine mine without you. Julian's arms slowly dropped. Logan continued. Then you told me to choose you when I was sober. He gave a nervous laugh. I have been extremely sober for 4 miserable days. Julian looked down. You do not owe me an answer. Stop doing that. Doing what? Giving me an exit every time I get close enough to tell you the truth. Julian became still. Logan stepped closer. That promise did not make me fall in love with you. Those dates did not make me fall in love with you. They just made me look at what was already there. Julian's eyes lifted to his. Logan's voice softened. You are the first person I call when something goes wrong. You are the first person I want when something goes right. You know when I am lying about being okay. You remember things about me that I forget about myself. And when we stopped talking, every part of my day kept reaching for you. Julian's eyes filled, but he did not look away. I thought that was friendship because friendship was the safest word I had. Logan moved within arm's reach. It was never big enough. Julian swallowed. Are you sure? Logan held out his pinky. Julian stared at it, then gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh through the emotion on his face. Absolutely not. He pushed Logan's hand down. No more drunken pinky promises. Logan smiled. Fair. Julian took Logan's whole hand instead, threading their fingers together. Logan looked down at them, then back at him. I choose you now. Julian closed his eyes for 1 second, as if 6 years had finally become too heavy to carry. When he opened them, Logan saw relief there. Fear too. Love most of all. Julian stepped forward, and Logan pulled him into his arms. The hug was tight and quiet, neither rushing to release the other. Logan rested his cheek against Julian's hair. 6 months, Julian whispered. 6 months, Logan agreed. You are going to call me? Constantly. You will regret this relationship by Tuesday. Julian laughed against his shoulder. When they finally pulled apart, Logan touched Julian's cheek. Julian leaned into his palm without thinking. This time there was no alcohol, no experiment, no deadline, and no confusion to hide behind. Logan kissed him softly. Julian kissed him back, one hand still holding Logan's, and the years between friendship and love finally stopped feeling like a distance they had to cross. 6 months later, Logan stepped off the train in Portland carrying one duffel bag, a backpack, and enough nervous energy to power the station. He had imagined this moment during every late night in Seattle. Sometimes Julian would wave. Sometimes he would run toward him. Once, during an especially exhausting week, Logan imagined a handwritten welcome home sign and immediately decided that version of Julian had been replaced by an alien. Reality was simpler. Julian stood near the end of the platform in a navy coat, hands tucked into his pockets, watching the crowd. Then he saw Logan. His entire face changed. Logan had spent 6 months learning that love was often hidden in ordinary things. Morning messages before training. Video calls while Julian ate dinner and Logan folded laundry. Packages containing coffee, books, and notes reminding Logan to sleep. Julian staying awake when Logan had a difficult day, even though he had work the next morning. Logan taking the train home, whenever his schedule allowed, only to discover that 48 hours with Julian could disappear faster than 10 minutes anywhere else. They had argued twice. Missed calls, misread texts, apologized, learned, stayed. Now Julian walked toward him, trying and failing to hide his smile. "You look terrible," he said. Logan dropped his duffel bag. "I traveled 170 miles for this abuse. You chose Seattle. Missed you too." Julian lasted another second before wrapping both arms around him. Logan held him just as tightly, eyes closing as the station noise faded around them. There it was. Home. Not Portland. Not an apartment. Not a city. This. Logan pulled back enough to kiss Julian's temple. "Hi." Julian smiled. "Hi." 3 months later, they moved into a 2-bedroom apartment together. The second bedroom was supposedly an office, although it quickly became storage for Julian's restoration supplies and Logan's collection of things he insisted might become useful someday. One rainy Sunday, Julian was unpacking an old box when he found a folded receipt. "Logan, that tone suggests I am in trouble. Come here." Logan appeared from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs. Julian held up the receipt from the bar. On the back, written in Logan's crooked handwriting, were the terms of their ridiculous agreement. 3 months. No chickening out. Logan stared at it, then laughed. "I cannot believe you kept that. I keep important things." The words landed softly. Logan looked at Julian, then at the piece of paper that had somehow survived the night neither of them could completely forget. He took a pen from the table and crossed out 30. Then 3 months. Beneath them, he wrote 2 new words. "Now. Always." Julian read them and raised an eyebrow. "Always." Logan suddenly looked nervous. "Too much." Julian folded the receipt carefully. "No." He placed it inside the old book he had been repairing, between 2 clean sheets of protective paper. "I just want to make sure you understand that always is a dangerously long promise." Logan stepped closer and slipped his arms around Julian's waist. "Good." Julian rested his hands against Logan's shoulders. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. 10 years of friendship lived in that silence. College fries, midnight calls, hospital coffee, Sunday dinners, bad dates, inside jokes. 3 awkward dates that should never have felt so natural. 6 years of Julian waiting. Months of Logan finally learning to see. "You know what is strange?" Logan said. "What?" "Nothing changed." Julian smiled. "Everything changed." Logan considered that, then nodded. "Yeah, that too." Julian kissed him, gentle and familiar, and Logan smiled against him. Outside, Portland rain tapped quietly against the windows. Inside, 2 best friends stood in the middle of a half-unpacked home, finally understanding that they had not crossed some invisible line and left their friendship behind. They had simply given a name to where it had been leading them all along.